Here we go. This is the first edition of the story series. The story is about Krav Maga, and they will follow through through several weeks, hopefully more than 52, and that's a full year. But today, the whole idea is to get started with some history. The history, and I'll pick up um, a book called Odyssey. It shows the journey of the last escape from the dominated Europe. The story of those Jews who gambled their lives for freedom and won. So it's a book about Krav Maga, either we think it or not, but it's also a book about doing some very, very difficult things. Um, we'll also have some Q&A, and I've prepared a couple of them that appear mostly at class, mostly at or prior to that. Things like why should you do Krav Maga? Is Krav Maga only good for women, or oh, I heard that Krav Maga is good for women? And what should you look for when you are going to start doing a class? Or what is my opinion after these years of work in many different places and with so many different people? What are the signs of a good school? Um, I'll also look at as a fourth thing into the 360 plus counter discussion, and I do have our stick figure in here to help us because some mechanical concepts will be important to be understood using these joints. Okay, so you'll see that the head bands and the body bands. So this is a pretty interesting folk to work with as you are thinking about what is the impact of a technique, or impact the mechanical aspect of a technique. But let's start from the beginning. So welcome all. I hope you enjoyed the theme and this. The theme is definitely on the history and the making of Krav Maga by the founder, and it's strictly connected to the book. Um, I didn't know much about him, except obviously from the things that we've got on our website. That's quite enough, quite starting from his foundational work with his father. But I discovered the book Odyssey because of someone in American Krav Maga, and decided that we should read it. So I did that. And what I'm bringing you in this theme from yesterday, for today, is what are the words and the steps in here where you see Imi appear. Let me give you a background. So again, the book name is Odyssey, okay, and I'll have it in the show notes. Nice thing to say. It's inexpensive, to be fair. It cost me $3. But let's see what is it about. With no other means of escape, more than 500 Jews crowned aboard the Pentcho, a decrepit paddle steamer, to begin one of the most remarkable voyages in modern history. The time, May of 1940, 8 months after the outbreak of World War II. The place, Bratislava, so that's where they came from, the capital of the Nazi puppet state of Slovakia. The route, down the Danube River and out into the open sea. Their destination, Palestine. It was a journey that should have taken a month, but took 4 years of frustration and severe hardship would pass before they finally reached the promised land. For many of Pentcho's passengers, the members of a fiery and dedicated Zionist youth group, the voyage was not mere flight, but the pursuit of a dream. For others, already robbed of their possessions and driven to their homes, it was the last chance to escape the impending Holocaust. So there are many things happening towards the story in here. I've highlighted page by page where you'll see more Imi appearing in the story, but I wanted to give you the idea of how was the environment in this Slovakian state, Slovakian country that was already ruled and was bowing to the Nazi protectorate. Let's say that we go into in page 42, there is, I will say, the first time that Imi is mentioned, and these guys are, well, this is happening in the city, and let's see from here. Just making sure, as Slovakia became a puppet state, it also got starting to become more appreciative of the Nazi judgment and ruling. So they said that the Jews were no longer able to be in a bar. Okay, they can no longer be in there and be with their friends, having their right to drink or to have something. So that was really the start of closing down freedom. So I'll walk you through page 42, and let's see this. The bar felt silent as Imi Lichtenfeld shouldered his way into it. He was not unused to being noticed when he entered a public place. Bratislava was not, after all, such a big city, and he was something of a local celebrity, but this was not that kind of silence. Otto, the waiter, from his mouth into a mute "oh" of appeal and shook his head, eyes darting anxiously to side. "Please, Mr. Imi," he whispered. "You know we can serve you." As Lichtenfeld pushed past him and perched on a high stool at the bar, feeling the ice boring into his back, Fat Irma, the proprietress of the Kit Kat bar. So I know the place. It would be fun if someone could locate it via Google and try to understand if it still exists. She bustled over from the cash register, all bosom and bombazine. "Okay, please, Imi," she entreated. "I don't want no trouble." "One drink," he told her. "One drink and I'll go." She could tell by the set of his jaw that she would get nowhere arguing with him. If she called Alois the bouncer, Imi would make mincemeat of him, and probably smash the place up in the process. Although he wasn't one to throw his weight around unless provoked, important things, okay? He was a holy terror when roused, as just about everyone in Bratislava knew. So Imi was known for this, okay? Not being provoked, but if it is provoked, he would intervene, okay? So perhaps the best thing was to give him his drink and encourage him to leave as fast as possible before one or more of the customers starting making trouble, or, God forbid, the cops arrived. "All right," she snapped, squeaking through the blue veil of smoke that rose from the cigarette clamped between her lips. "One drink and then out." Imi flashed her little boy-lost smile. He knew to be so effective. This is a curious perspective on him, okay? So effective with older woman as, and was rewarded with an almost immediate response. The hard carapace seemed to crack, and Fat Irma said, For Christ, Imi, I'm sorry it's like this. I really am." So this was the environment that was happening in Bratislava at that moment. Okay, further along, we'll see more things happening with Imi. It's really important also to know that there is a set of things in here that they do explain, explain about Imi and the fact that he was taught by his father. And I'll walk you through in page 44. Certainly it had been a long time since anybody had tried to put the superbly muscled, fiercely mustached Samuel Lichtenfeld down for any reason. Okay, so think about this. His father was also a very, very strong person, and obviously being a detective there. He had been a circus strongman before joining the police and rising to become chief of detectives for the city of Bratislava, famous throughout Czechoslovakia for having brought some of the Republic's most notorious criminals to justice. that was his father, okay? So that's where he came from. As soon as Imi was old enough, Samu had taught him to box and wrestle and coached him in track, gymnastics, and swimming. Okay, so we know from where boxing is coming, we know from where wrestling is coming, and of course track, gymnastics, and swimming. See, most of the key capabilities in terms of later on in excelling in good physical fitness. Imi excelled in all, and in time had become almost as celebrated as his father, though not so much for his athletic prowess as for his role in the violent street disturbances that began to rack the Slovak capital from mid-30s on. Bratislava at that time had a population of 140,000, of whom 20,000 were Jews and the rest about equally Slovaks, Czechs and Germans. The pretext for the first major anti-Semitic outbreak in 1936 had been the showing of a film about the Golem of Prague, a fabled monster created by a 7th century rabbi to protect his people from the Nazi hostile Christians. So this continues on, but the most important part in here, well, you understand where street fighting comes along, is the street fighting continuing intermittently, mainly because there were a lot of things happening due to this new, well, the movie, the theme of the movie, the Golem, spotted it, but then later on, street fighting started to appear, and the street fighting continues on page 45. The street fighting continued intermittently. Long periods of calm were followed by sharp bursts of violence as one pretext inspired a fresh eruption of ethnic hatred. To the Jewish youth of the city, Imi Lichtenfeld became an emblem and a hero. Idealized and emulated by youngsters who flocked to join Jewish sports and athletic clubs at the paramilitary Battle Group, determined to prove their manhood and train to defend themselves and their turf. He led these folks, he trained them. Of course, he had this background. Definitely, I would like you guys to read the whole book, but later on, forward, folks. So think about this. This was the build-up, okay? I'll move to the next. I'm going to say next intervention. I will see Imi, and in page 91, and this already a lot of things have happened. The Pentcho, the boat, it's like an old Mississippi boat river. Tried to do this amazing thing with 400 people in it. Later became 500. To come from Bratislava to the open sea and being able to navigate. There are a lot of histories behind it, and the fact that these folks that were flooding the country, trying to find a better life, were known to be in any way. In one of the afternoons where the boat had to stop endangered in the Danube River, Imi Lichtenfeld, on the deck, the Pentcho best swimmer Lichtenfeld dozing in the sun after a vigorous gymnastics workout. So, even while you are traveling, you can work out. That was true. Was awakened by shouts of alarm. Imi, come quickly. Ben is drowning. Benny Willinger, a novice swimmer, had failed to surface after diving. His companions were searching frantically, but they were not experts. Unable to reach the bottom where Willinger lay tangled in a forest of weed, Imi Lichtenfeld jackknifed over the side into 20 feet of water to join the rescue attempt, swallowing to equalize the pressure on his ears and search the bottom for the missing youth. So he did really know how to swim and also to swim and rescue. In the dark green murk, visibility was limited, and his first two dives proved fruitless. On the third, he spotted Willinger, no longer struggling. Means not well, correct. The boy, though barely conscious, reached out and where a drowning person might be expected to clench convulsively, touched his rescuer lightly on the arm. In seconds, Imi Lichtenfeld had him loose and was bearing him to the surface. Not long after, the water forced him from his lungs by artificial respiration. Willinger was sitting up thanks to his rescuer. Lichtenfeld was the hero of the Pentcho, though he considered the rescue to have been an easy enough matter for a swimmer of his ability. What struck him most about the episode was the extraordinary trust implicit in Willinger's gentle, pacific touch as he reached out for him on the riverbed. So this is, and the reason also I'm bringing this, it's because this episode has implications for what's going to happen in the travel a couple of months next. In page 96, 97, in page 98, you have an awesome picture of Imi in his gymnastics form lifting up a girl. Imi Lichtenfeld, wrestler, gymnast, dancer, and ladies' man, okay, whose courage and daring inspired his fellow passengers. There are more comments later on that I've observed in the groups regarding how they dealt with his family life, but that's not the case in here. It's about looking into his intervention. I'd like to move forward to page 123. So we've seen that we had this environment in Bratislava, then the whole set of things that happened, and that was one episode in the Danube River, and now they do cross to almost reaching Greece, and they have a chance to get to an island called Kamilanici. Okay. So what do they do? And again, Imi was always called for very tough things, like we need to make survival rescue, we need to go and find water, we need to go and find communications. This was another of those. Let's read through, okay? Sometime after 11 p.m., Schalk and Imi Lichtenfeld, now themselves on Kamilanici, with their three companions, the island, saw the Pentcho navigation lights. So they were in this island trying to find something, and then they got spread from the boat. They had hoped to find habitation on the island, perhaps some fishing boats whose owners could be persuaded to go out and tow the Pentcho to safety. So that was the support they were looking for. But Kamilanici had turned out to be completely deserted. All they could do to help now was to try to guide the vessel to a safe anchorage. The island was about 2 miles long by half a mile wide and crescent-shaped. The inside of the crescent was a gently shelving sandy bay where the Pentcho could anchor safely. So this was probably a place where they could stop the boat and get some help. So again, these guys were far and always trying to find solutions for their community. This was another one of them. Chapter 9, I would say it's probably the strongest one, where you see more things happening with me and this team and this team and these mates. I would definitely like to point you guys for the following. They did come back. They did bring the Pentcho to Kamilanici, that island, but again, the island has no resources, so they had to fish. They had to find food in many different ways. The problem is water, of course. So there was a decision to try to find help further ahead. Rounding up Lichtenfeld, Urks, Lanes, and Ali the Turk, he proposed that they leave in the morning after the Yom Kippur and strike out for Crete, some 40 miles to the south. Okay, it would be no pleasure trip, to be sure, for gathering clouds suggest bad weather to come. But with 2 pairs of strong men rowing in relays, while a 5th man on the tiller, he calculated that they should reach their goal between 24 to 36 hours. That was the plan, okay? The plan to go out to Crete and try to find more resources. Watching them row off the horizon, Karl Hoffmann thought, it is a courageous gesture considering the odds against him. And with no other castaways, he stood on the cliff top waving until they are out of sight. So here they go, these 5 guys in a boat trying to find help for the whole community. All day Schalk and his crew rowed against mounting seas and the headwind, which made each yard gained an exhausting effort. Tough, we don't have instruments to know the traveling, and Though tormented by pain of an ear infection which had been troubling him since the day he had dived into the Danube to rescue young Benny Willinger, Lichtenfeld insisted on rowing non-stop while his companions spelled each other. Okay, this is important because that initial rescue that was considered easy made something on his ears. Okay, probably the fact that he had to maintain the pressure equalized in order to save the person, but it did save it. That night the storm gathered full force, and to the 5 men tossed and buffeted, soaked and terrified in their tiny craft, it seemed that awesome force was directed entirely malevolently against them. The suffering Lichtenfeld was horrified by the size of the waves. A solid, and this comes in commas, a solid wall of water several meters high, constantly bearing down on us. So this continues. I'm in page 135, 136. The days pass. The hardship continues. Screaming to the others to wake up, he began bailing frantically with cupped hands. Lichtenfeld grabbed a bucket from under the forepack and joined in. So the water was starting to fill the boat. Ali used his hat to bail. Erks groped underwater into the dark to find the cause of the leak. He located it, a bilge plug, a couple of inches in diameter, had obviously worked loose during the storm and popped out while they slept. Water was coming in fast, and the plug itself was nowhere to be found. Hard in the sea and trying to struggle back from this. They did find a way to fix this, okay, their ingenious way to fit into the hole. Really agonizing, slow work to do this. Later on the third day, at the dawn of the third day, brought no sight of land or ship. So these 3 days in sea paddling, okay, no? Lichtenfeld was now in delirium of pain from his ear infections. All of them were suffering very acutely from saltwater sores and thirst, and they were cold. A piercing wind penetrated to the bone as they lay, wet and exhausted, in the tiny, bobbling craft. That day they discussed the possibility of ending their suffering by committing suicide. Schalk had brought 2 handguns with him, but when he checked them, he found their mechanisms so corroded by saltwater that they were useless. On the morning of the 4th day, there was more talk about suicide. Erks and Lenz were contemplating going over the side, swimming away from the boat and drowning. But now, somehow finding a new determination to survive, Schalk had turned against the idea of suicide. No, he said, we must stay in the boat. So this continues. I would say the fantastic part is that later on, the same time while they were lying in the bottom of the boat, huddled together for warmth, Lenz roused them. Listen, he said, I hear something, an engine. So an aircraft, a recognizing aircraft from Her Majesty, the ship Illustrious, was 60 miles away, and being fair, they were saved. Okay, this was, you'll see that the story is really interesting. Now, one of the important things, let's go back to Imi, as sick birth attendants bandaged their tortured hands and administered pain-killing drugs to alleviate the agony of Lichtenfeld's ear infection, Schalk broke into a prolonged fit of uncontrolled sobbing. These guys were really in big pain and trouble. Later, when they were interrogated by a young officer who spoke flawless German, like the Italians at Stampa Alia, you need to read that part of the story. It's really impeccable. It's incredible. He seemed to have some initial doubts about their story. 500 people trying to get to Palestine on a Danube River steamer, impossible. Yet again, the very unlikeliness of their story gave it credibility, and the Englishman was soon satisfied with Schalk and the company where they were claimed to be, rather than the German seeming to pose as refugees. So that I would say starts the rescue. Page 140 is really about the fact that when this fleet reached Alexandria, Schalk and the company were removed from the ship called the Nubian, and they later joined. They joined the Czechoslovak, the Free Czech forces, to align and fight in the British along the British in the North Africa. I'll walk you through the pieces of Imi Lichtenfeld, and here we go. In Turkey, and this is an important part. In Turkey, Lichtenfeld underwent no fewer than 3 major operations on his left ear. So that's why you see the fact that his face and his ear is not. It has that shape. Okay. We watched over Imi day and night. Schalk later recalled, "The doctor said if he wasn't so strong, he would surely have died." Another hint: if we are strong physically, mentally, we can overcome a lot of things. Another hint coming from deep in history. Okay? In the spring of 1941, as soon as Lichtenfeld had recovered sufficiently, the 4 of them joined the Free Czech forces, which were fighting alongside the British in North Africa. Although Palestine, their goal was only a short train ride away from Alexandria, it would be a long time before any of them would reach it, and before they would discover the fate of comrades they had left in the behind on the Khmelnytskyi, so in the alley. So I would say from that part forward, so these guys go to war, to fight for their things that they believe. Later on in the epilogue of the book, I've mentioned this in another part. In the summer of 1983, the Pentcho people held a reunion to mark the 40th anniversary of their liberation from the camp at Faramonte. Of the 540 men, women, and children who had been cast away on Khmelnytskyi, so the island where they stopped, about 200 were still living, and since 2/3 of these were residents or citizens of the State of Israel, the rest being scattered around the globe, from America to Australia, the reunion was in Tel Aviv. I'll pick you up the part regarding Imi. There was Imi Lichtenfeld, still unmistakably the athlete despite his 73 years. His face permanently twisted and scarred by the 3 operations he had undergone in Alexandria, so we know why and where and when. He had undergone in Alexandria to remove infected bone and tissue from around his left ear. Especially for a handsome man, proud of his looks, that was no small disfigurement. But his body retains the stealthy grace of a panther, and no one sensed that if called upon, it would still respond with the speed and accuracy of an assassin's knife. For more than 20 years following independence, he was the Israeli Armed Forces chief instructor in unarmed combat, teaching a system which he developed and refined himself to generations of instructors, who in turn taught it to the commandos, paratroopers, and other special forces who have given Israel an almost legendary preeminence in their particular brand of warfare. The system, called Krav Maga, is so lethal that, unlike the other martial arts, it is never practiced as a competitive sport. Yet Lichtenfeld gives the impression of an essentially unassertive, peaceful man, unwilling to speak ill or hear ill of anyone. Although long retired from the army, he is still instructing at the government sports and physical training center, and despite his years is trying to raise the capital to open a center of his own in Netanya. Stop there. This is his part. The book has more. The book has more things about who surrounds him and how things worked at that time, and what did this mean for the Jewish that came along. There is also a note on sources. I insist you guys to read it, because many of the sources came from history, from stories and history, and they are important to they made dozens of interviews with the Pentcho survivors. There are documents, diaries, there are many things out there. But it's an important book if you are into Krav Maga to read it, okay? I had so much pleasure reading it, and I think this is kind of my summary to do this. So I've walked you through the theme, the history behind things that we do. I'll now go back to go immediately to the technical part. Now they had a question the other day, that is, if you get punched with the circular thing, okay, like this, to the head, why shouldn't we strike the plexus? Well, a few mechanical problems with that. First of all, there is a lot of mass in here if you punch in here, okay? Although the solar plexus of someone is particularly the physiology behind it and the biomechanical side behind it might be beneficial, because if you break the center line, you could have even some lungs being perforated, but you need a lot of strength in there. And it's also along the same line of strength in here, so you'll be battling one line with another. That's probably not the best way to do. Now, usually the solution in Krav Maga is to stop the attack in here, and at the same time go for the head. There is some fundamental thing in here, is that the physiology behind it, meaning what the reaction of the systems when you hit the head, that are kind of the same in here, it's more disruptive in the head, because you have the blinking of the eyes and also the fact that the head articulates, you see? So if you hit someone in here, it will go in this direction, okay? The head will go back. If you hit someone in the chest, the possibilities to make is for this. See this? And this just means that he crouches on top of you. This means that he moves back, okay? Why? Because the body weight is going in that direction. So that's a really good thing, because now you can also see, if the sun helps me, good, that this groin guard is open, okay? That this groin area is open. So what happened? This is a fun thing to do with my toy. So if we hit in here, mechanically it opens up this line. So you have the groin to kick, okay? As you kick the groin, moving it back, it would be better if we had more articulation in there. You have the ability to go for the legs, okay? Even if they are like this. So if the body weight is going back and the knees are back, it's very hard to be grabbed. Very hard for the attacker to grab you, because his body weight is moving back. So he's like in a seated position, okay? He moves back into what could be seated. Try to grapple someone if you are falling back or you are in the squat position, okay? Very hard. That's why the 360 is made in that direction, okay? So this is a bit of an exaggeration, because being seated would mean this, but what we want for the attacker is, if he's in here, his body weight is moving forward, like this. We go for the head, back, and then from here, either you can kick the groin, or in this case, one of the options could be also to make to pull up the leg and take him to the ground, send him to the ground, okay, so that you are able to kick and get off. So that's why hitting the chest, very near the center of mass, is usually not a good solution. Better to hit the center line, okay? You understand why? So body weight is in here, and again, if you hit the head, his body weight will align in this direction, okay? And if I am here, very hard to be grabbed. If I hit in the chest, and if I am here, look, very easy to be grabbed, okay? So that's a very straightforward explanation on 360 with the counter. Go for the head, even if you are smaller, okay? Because you'll go for the head in a diagonal line, probably even more interesting. One thing, the technique side, let's move to the Q&A, okay, Q&A. So I'll go and do the first Q&A. Why should you do Krav Maga? Well, Um, I think that you should do Krav Maga if you want to learn how to defend yourself and support others in the case of need. Specifically, why Krav Maga? Because as curriculum, it has taken away, remember from the book, it has taken away anything that has to do with sports and competition. In specific things like I will defend and then I will counter, very kind of useful for sports competition match because you're setting up the schema or you're setting up for the points. This was removed. It does exist, but it's like a last resort. Okay, so one important thing, the curriculum is all organized in ways to remove any competitive aspect, any sports competitive aspect that lead to having a referee and a set of rules. So Krav Maga is based on not having rules, not having the rules that are existing in any kind of sporting match, either ground settings like BJJ or wrestling matches over there, boxing, full contact, and even MMA in the extreme, although MMA has much less restrictions. We can talk more about this, but again, I would say the fact that the curriculum is very systematic, the fact that it is fully oriented only for scenarios of self-defense, only for that, and it builds up over the years. So that's an important thing when you're looking on why should I do this. Also because it's when we say it's based on simple and gross human movements, it's true. 360, grab, pull, defense, they are all based on specific movements that you do on the day-to-day, applied in self-defense. There is a flip side in that is it's also based on what will the attacker do. So if you punch the throat, usually the head goes back, or the chin comes down. If you hit the eyes, the head goes back. So those mechanical aspects are all infused in the practice of Krav Maga. We can work more on that, but I'll leave the why in there. It's the systematicity, the fact that it was trialed and tested in war scenarios where the timing is different from a sports scenario. The fact that the curriculum builds upon each other based only on self-defense scenarios heavily tested. So that is, and obviously the fact that Krav Maga builds inside a very strict amount of values. That is, how do you work with people at the class? But I'll provide you more on that. Another question that I have is, Krav Maga is good for women, or only for women should do this. And sometimes I hear men saying this. I'm going to say I disagree that Krav Maga is good only for women. And when men say this, they put themselves in the position that, I know how to defend myself because I'm big, I'm stronger, or I'm a man. The thought process is this. If in a situation of self-defense, if you are with your wife or your friend or your girlfriend, or if you are with someone else from the opposite sex or from the same sex, and the attacker decides to go for you, even although you are bigger and stronger, it's just because he's more confident. It's just because he thinks that he can do that. He thinks, or perhaps he has an object, a knife or a gun. So Krav Maga, it's not only good for the ones that are weak or weaker in terms of physical strength, okay, or at least when you look at them. It's for everyone. Krav Maga is for everyone that needs to help others and needs to help themselves in defending. So think about that when you say, or have the kids do it. I don't recommend Krav Maga for kids. After they are 7, 10, perhaps, and we did a lot of work on finding a curriculum that could suit kids, because these days, if you teach Krav Maga to your son and he effectively defends himself, it's going to be hard to explain why did, let's say, the attacker got in your son's or daughter's hand on his eyes and then a kick to the groin. because this would be simplistic things to do and in the right timing. So perhaps having those decisions being taken by adults, it's more likely. We do have a program for kids. We've changed some things, even the approach. But for now, the question is, Krav Maga is good for women? Yes, of course. It's good for women or for anyone when you are tackling or you need to tackle a stronger opponent. Stronger, quicker, any kind of opponent that is willing to cause you harm. So I would say I would remove the gender from there. Now, the last question that I've got in here is what to look for when I want to start training Krav Maga. I've posted something on Reddit some time ago on this and in Quorum, and I would say that when you want to start training Krav Maga, you should look for Krav Maga. That's one important thing. Avoid things that are Krav Maga plus this, Krav Maga plus that, Krav Maga minus this, minus that, or Krav Maga latest commando XYZ response. Folks that have done Krav Maga and then later on even add their own name or their own system into that, specifically, I would say only their view of the world. It could work or not. Usually you will find many of the top practitioners these days, they are connected in associations or organizations. They are big. There are 5 big organizations that will help you as a practitioner make sure that you receive a couple of things. One, a standardized curriculum. With a standardized curriculum meaning what is a jab? Why do we employ the jab? What is the front choke defense? Why do we do it? So you'll have a standardized curriculum. You have also standards that help you move from the several stages in the curriculum. You will also have an organized way to build instructors. So it's not because someone is a black belt that he will become an instructor. It needs training on the art and science of instruction. So it does need to have the technical content, but it needs to have also the instructor path being followed. So, and you'll find these 2 structures, belts or degrees, in the path of you as a practitioner or in the path of you as an instructor. And they usually run in parallel, okay? And they have challenges or exams that you need to pass, and that makes lots of sense. So I've got these 2 structures in here. I would say that someone that is giving Krav Maga classes, at least they should have 3 to 5 years before starting of practice and instructor path. So these 2 things can come in parallel. Someone that has done a couple of other things could effectively do Krav Maga techniques, but it's very hard for them to teach the system as an overall. So that's one thing. That's curriculum of instructor, curriculum for the practitioner. Second one is look into the school values and what they stand for. Just read them. Read some reviews, of course, and then go to the class and see what is being emphasized, what is being brought into you. See if the approach is too violent. See what brings up from you. You see, if at the end you feel energized, empowered, but in peace, man, that's a good thing from my view. If you're coming with a relentless mind, focusing only on bad things, on aggression and violence, from my approach, that things need to change. So focus on these, the curriculum structure, the values of the school and the certifications of the teachers in there, and then also the environment. And these things should give you a very good straightforward path by eliminating what doesn't fit into here, meaning foolish techniques, meaning egomaniacs, meaning military-based only view or bad views of the world. Okay, Krav Maga is definitely something to help promote a humanitarian view of the world. What that means is that you will be able to intervene when it's needed to protect your life and the life of others. So we covered a lot of stuff. The Odyssey book and the team on history, the technique with our Krav Maga buddy here. Say hello to them. Okay, my son draw a nice smile over there. And also we've covered the Q&A. So feel free to reach me out if you've got any more questions, and stay tuned for next week. Enjoy your day.